EU signed a trade deal with the United States which opened roads for cooperation as well as opened the Pandora's box for critics inside the European Union. Russia is dragging the negotiations with Ukraine for as long as possible and why it would doom the entire Russian war machine. This is UATV English. Let's break it all down and put you in focus on these hot events. The EU intends to completely abandon Russian energy sources as part of its agreements with Washington. This was announced by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen following a meeting with US President Donald Trump. Over the next 3 years, the European Union will purchase $750 billion worth of oil, liquefied gas, and nuclear fuel from the US. The purchases will be handled by private companies, which will receive all necessary assistance at the EU level. See more in a report by our correspondents.
The EU intends to completely abandon Russian energy resources as part of agreements with Washington. This was stated by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen following a meeting with US leader Donald Trump. Over 3 years, the European Union will purchase oil, liquefied natural gas, and nuclear fuel from the US for $750 billion. The purchases will be handled by private companies, which will receive all necessary support at the EU level.
And indeed, we still have too much Russian LNG that is coming through the back door again to our European Union, and some Russian gas and oil still in the European Union, which we do not want anymore. We want to absolutely get rid of Russian fossil fuels. And therefore, it is much welcome to purchase the more affordable and better LNG from the United States. And there, approximately, our estimation is that we can do 250 per year over 3 years.
The largest deal between the European Union and the US has been reached, stated White House leader Donald Trump. Brussels has committed to investing hundreds of billions of dollars in the American economy, and in return, Washington is reducing tariffs on EU products to 15%. The agreement between Washington and Brussels is considered a compromise, as the EU initially sought zero tariffs from the US, while Trump pushed for 30%. Nevertheless, as reported by the BBC, the reached deal will strengthen bilateral trade agreements.
So we're going to do the following. The European Union is going to agree to purchase from the United States $750 billion worth of energy. They are going to agree to invest into the United States $600 billion more than they're investing already. So they're investing a large amount of money. You know what that amount of money is. It's very substantial, but they're going to invest an additional $600 billion. They're agreeing to open up their countries to trade at zero tariff. So that's a very big factor. Opening up their countries, all of the countries will be opened up to the United States at zero tariff. Donald Trump, President of the United States.
According to Bloomberg, the EU agreed to the deal with Trump on 15% tariffs on goods from member states, among other reasons, due to fears of losing support for Kyiv. The deal's terms were coordinated at the level of member state governments. Brussels sought to avoid economic risks and was not prepared to openly confront the US.
Partly it's down to lingering worries about their dependence on the U.S. for security and the concern that Trump might respond to trade pressure by cutting support for Ukraine in its fight against the Russian invasion, from a publication by Bloomberg.
Analysts note that without U.S. assistance, it will be difficult for the EU to sharply increase LNG purchases. At the same time, potential military agreements are also being discussed. Arms supplied to EU countries can be directly transferred to Ukraine to protect against Russian aggression.
I could imagine that the Europeans in these negotiations clearly gave signals that they might be willing to increase the European purchases of LNG. And it could also very well be that the Europeans gave signals to increase military equipment purchases from the US. I think that is both possible in terms of LNG. There is not so much room left what the Europeans can buy. But when you look at military equipment, Europe has promised to step up its defense spending. And the European military equipment industry does not have the capacity yet to provide all these equipment. So here, I think we could clearly see more European purchases of US-produced military equipment.
As a reminder, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the EU set a course to phase out Russian energy resources, particularly gas. Despite reduced supplies, in 2024, 10 EU countries continued limited imports of Russian pipeline gas. A complete ban on Russian pipeline gas is planned for 2028, but Brussels is pushing for acceleration. According to Reuters, leading European Parliament deputies propose moving the deadline to January 1st, 2027. The final decision will require approval from the European Parliament and a majority of EU member states. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now. Russian officials continue to delay high-level talks between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Putin. This is despite calls from the US for such a meeting, according to a report by the US Institute for the Study of War. Kyiv insists on the need for a summit between the leaders, arguing that this is the only way to reach real agreements. Learn more in our report.
Russian officials continue to delay high-level negotiations between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin, despite US calls for such a meeting, according to a report by the American Institute for the Study of War. Kyiv insists on the necessity of a leaders' summit, believing it is the only way to achieve real agreements, as stated by Rustem Umarov, head of the Ukrainian delegation at the Istanbul talks.
We propose to the Russian side to hold such a meeting of leaders until the end of August. By agreeing to this proposal, Russia can clearly demonstrate its constructive approach to everyone around the world, including our partners. Ukraine keeps insisting on a full and unconditional ceasefire as the necessary basis for effective diplomacy. We are ready for a ceasefire now and to start substantive peace negotiations, and it is up to either side to accept this basic step towards peace.
The day after the Istanbul talks, Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated that a high-level meeting before the end of summer is unlikely. According to him, quote, "All the preparatory work must be done to formalize the outcomes at these negotiations. What this work entails and what specific outcomes are expected, Peskov did not clarify. This is part of Putin's strategy, ISW analysts are convinced."
Institute for the Study of War continues to assess that Russia is feigning interest in negotiations in order to buy time to make gains on the battlefield and extract concessions from Ukraine and the West, in stark contrast to Ukraine's continued willingness to engage in negotiations to end the war. From a report by Institute for the Study of War.
The positions of Ukraine and Russia remain diametrically opposed, noted Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in an interview with Turkish channel NTV. Kyiv demands a full and unconditional ceasefire on land, sea, and air. Moscow continues to issue deliberately unacceptable ultimatums.
Mr. Zelenskyy and Mr. Putin have different conditions regarding a ceasefire to attend the summit. This is where the negotiating teams have a role to play. During the Istanbul negotiations, the Ukrainian delegation proposed holding a leaders' meeting by the end of August. However, no response has been received from the Russian side so far, from a report by Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Telegram.
On July 25th, during a UN Security Council meeting, the United States reminded Moscow of Donald Trump's deadline. Russia must agree to a ceasefire and begin substantive negotiations to end the war against Ukraine within 50 days. U.S. Representative Dorothy Shea noted that over 100 days ago, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution calling for the swift cessation of the war and the establishment of lasting peace in Ukraine. While this facilitated the start of Ukraine-Russia talks, the progress achieved falls far short of the actions needed for peace, the American diplomat emphasized.
Russia has continued to kill Ukrainian civilians. Russian drones and missiles have struck schools, playgrounds, apartment buildings, and nursing homes. Russia has deployed thousands of DPRK troops to its front lines and sent tens of thousands of Russian soldiers to die on the battlefield. If Russia does not agree within that time frame to stop the attacks, the United States is prepared to take further measures.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced his demand on July 14th, meaning the deadline expires on September 2nd. If Russia refuses to agree to peace terms, the White House leader threatened to impose 100% tariffs on the aggressor country and its partners, primarily targeting Russia's energy exports, the Kremlin's main source of revenue. Recently, when asked by a journalist whether sanctions against Russia could be imposed earlier than the stated deadline, Donald Trump responded,
"We're looking at that whole situation. It could be that we'll have to put secondary sanctions on them." 150 days.
Maybe, yeah.
The president has been in very close communication with his friends in the Senate, particularly Senator Lindsey Graham, on this issue. But the president has always maintained, he's the commander-in-chief and the president for a reason, and he has been deeply involved in this conflict since the beginning. And so any decisions that are made with respect to sanctions, the president wants to reserve that authority and that right to himself.
Turkey's foreign ministry stated it is ready to facilitate a leaders' summit in Istanbul. "We are working to create the conditions for this," said Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. Reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
Drop your thoughts and predictions on these developments below, and always stay in focus with UATV English.